Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. Charles Barkley gave us his thoughts on race relations. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, but the one thing I took out of that piece was, man, I think most white people and black people are great people. I really believe that in my heart. But I think our system is set up where our politicians, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, are designed to make us not like each other so they can keep their grasp of money and power. They divide and conquer. I truly believe in my heart most white people and black people are awesome people, but we're so stupid following our politicians, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. And their only job is, hey, let's make these people not like each other. We don't live in their neighborhoods. We all got money. Let's make the whites and blacks not like each other. Let's make rich people and poor people not like each other. Let's scramble the middle class. I truly believe that in my heart.
Hot take while talking about basketball from Charles Barkley. I have to be honest, though, as you dissect some of what he said, and I'm sure we have problems with parts of it no matter who you are, the vast overall arching message of that idea doesn't seem that untrue, and it goes well beyond race relations to me. I think that so many people need to speak in such extremes to have the attention of the audience they're going after, of the general public, whoever it is, that these extremes do divide us further. There is some value in talking about, and this is not any one politician, by the way. Some people, a lot of people actually, would tell you that a previous president was the whole problem, the only problem, and we've never seen a problem like him, or we're not going to see one after him, and yet you're seeing this same sort of thing happen. I mean, we don't have to look any further than Georgia when we talk about the way in which the reaction to a law has been so significant and that it's harming people who are within the community that these businesses are quote unquote trying to protect by doing things like boycotting the NBA, moving the All-Star game out of that area. When you look at Atlanta, and you just wonder so much about whether or not we're getting so far ahead of ourselves in the way in which we understand and even just consume these ideas, these topics, these stories, and the way in which we pit one group of people against another group of people. We try to have an enemy. Everyone's looking for someone to be an enemy these days so that they know who it is that they're arguing and fighting with. And that all does a disservice to us as a society, as a group that needs to find a way to be capable of an Easter Sunday where nobody argues about politics, even if you disagree. That's right. I disagree with you about your politics, and I don't mind breaking bread, having a meal with you, and at the end of the day, going home and thinking you're still a good person, even though you and I didn't come to the same conclusions that so many of us are forced to come to. And honestly, as I look at Georgia more and more, and the rule and the way in which Atlanta and businesses being boycotted is going to impact black-owned businesses, going to impact that community more than they want it to on a financial scale, I wonder why we couldn't wait for a law that got passed. The politicians in the area passed this law. It has, every legal ability to exist. Why can't we let it be in effect? Like anything else in politics, anything else that happens in the world of law, why can't you let something that you think is a good idea play itself out? And if you find out that it's not a good idea, if you hear report after report of actual human beings incapable of voting, incapable of getting their very legal opinion put into an election, then we address the issue then. I mean, it looks like we've done that in the opposite as far as what we've done here with what happened in the election that former President Trump thought was illegitimate, that a lot of people thought was maybe with moments of fraud, and certainly the way in which we changed laws to allow for voting for COVID-19, because of COVID-19, to allow for people to vote by mail to degrees that we had never seen in the past. All those things happened. And the idea from politicians was, all right, well, we'll deal with any negative things that we find from this after the fact. Now, Georgia would like all people that vote to have an ID, a photo ID that demonstrates they're the person they say they are, even to vote by mail. And photo IDs, I guess, are tricky to get in some scenarios. If it's not a driver's license, a passport, whatever, there's got to be some way that they want or need for you to demonstrate who you are before you cast the ballot. But that is obviously racial. That's obviously a lot of fighting. And actually, if we just turn to Ilhan Omar, who talks about the boycott going on, she obviously feels quite good about it. And that confuses me a lot. Because when we get to the point where politicians are saying that it's good that money, revenue, isn't going into a community because the greater good is being served, and then she compares it to some things that are not the same, I do think we're getting into a dangerous area, and one that people have been saying is a more corporate-controlled world than any of us would want it to be.
We know that boycotts have allowed for justice to be delivered in many spaces. The civil rights movement was rooted in boycotts. We know that, apartheid ended in South Africa because of boycotts. And so our hope is that, this boycott will result in changes in the law.
It's not a hope. It's not a hope that you want it to result in changes. It's a demand. It's a demand that changes to a law that was just passed happen again. And more importantly, it's not the same. I'm just going to be honest with you. It's not the same as apartheid. This is not the same as the civil rights movement to fight against a law passed by politicians elected to serve their community that they feel better protects the legitimacy of their election. This is not the same thing. This is protecting your ability as a Democrat to get people on your side of the aisle into the voters' box, whether or not they can prove they are who they say they are. And I don't know that it will be or won't be the right decision. And I know a lot of people are saying it's the wrong decision, and curse me if I'm the naysayer in the group. But all I can say to this is let's let it exist. It was passed. It's legitimate. It's a law now. You don't boycott, remove the NBA All-Star Game and remove all the revenue that goes into that area in order to punish the politicians in the state or in the city who believe certain things. That's not the same as what we're talking about here. And that's honestly a big part, a big reflection I have so often when I cover politics of the day and politicians and what they say and how they say it. And you heard time and again that President Trump was this guy, former President Trump, who would say horrible, outlandish, exaggerated things, that he caused the insurrection that happened in early January because of the way in which he spoke. And yet you hear other politicians speak and the dramatic usage of examples, words, the way in which they portray their ideas, the fight, win, democracy is at risk here. All of those things are heard by a lot of people not named Donald Trump, not former President Trump. A lot of other individuals say those sort of things. Even the word surge, which honestly came up. That was a challenge. I think I talked about it when I was in last week for Chad. By the way, Chad Benson back tomorrow. But the word surge used by President Biden, used by Kamala Harris, used by several people. AOC had a problem with it this past weekend when she thought that it was essentially hinting at an insurrection because people are surging to the border to try to get into our country. Certainly unaccompanied minors are. And that's overthinking a lot of things, and especially forgetting to do the right research to see if, hey, wait, did our guy say that word too? Because if he said it too, then I can't possibly say that vocabulary is the problem now. We need to find a way to do two things. Here's my bit. Two things as a society. First, get your message across and gain an audience without talking about it in the most hyperbolic of ways. Do your best as a group of individuals, as people, as politicians, as whoever, to get your point across with the most appropriate language, not the most captivating language. And I don't know if I'm going to follow that rule while I host a radio show. Forgive me. And then the second thing we need to do is just understand that not everybody agrees with us, and that's okay. People are not going to agree, and getting the politicians in office that you want is the whole goal. If you feel that a law that was passed is bad, guess what? Vote for the other team. When that team gets in office, they change that law. They change that rule. There's a lot of other things that take place in the world of politics that change the potential outcome of an election, because I can hear some voices already saying, Craig, if we let a rule exist for a while and it changes an election inappropriately, how is that at all okay? It's not. And there's things like gerrymandering that do that all the time. And so in all honesty and in all truthfulness, that's how governing works. That's how laws work. You pass something, you look for the success of it, you hope for the success of it. Certainly you can see the way defund the police has not worked in the areas that have done that. So as all these things progress, as all these things happen in our society, you have to react to it sometimes after, unfortunately, something has been passed. And certainly, I think the reactions to this law in Georgia are at best purposefully, or at worst, purposefully hyperbolic, and at best just over exaggerations of things that are not necessarily going to be as much of a problem. And if they are a problem, they can be addressed by politicians at that time. This is my opinion. Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
Well, get over it. It's time to forge a new path with your very own political cartographer, Chad.
Chad Benson is back tomorrow. I am Craig Collins filling in with you, hanging out here. Texas dropped its mask mandate in March, early March, I think the 10th actually. And everybody that thinks that a mask mandate is necessary said that horrible, terrible things were going to be happening in Texas as far as the numbers go for COVID-19. And obviously a lot of politicians, a lot of people are saying that they're worried about another huge spike in the numbers, mostly because of variants and other things. But here is the data. We are now almost a month from when the mask mandate was lifted. The first and maybe most interesting thing from this report from the Lone Star State is that 80% of people still wear a mask. This is a personal choice. This is something that a lot of people discussed as valuable in our society, to give people an option to choose and businesses to choose whether or not to require masks. These things are still going on. 80% of people, even though it's not a mandate, choosing to wear a mask anyway because they believe, or the companies that they're going to believe, that it is necessary to help protect against spread of the virus. The other big important stat is that the amount of cases has dropped by about 1,500 per day. The average case total is 3,263 daily confirmed cases. That is of just the other day. On March 10th, when they lifted the mandate, they were at 4,895 daily cases. The death rates have also dropped. They're at their lowest since November. So when we look at these sort of stats, we look at this information, and certainly so many people that have an opinion are not going to actually acknowledge stats and data when it exists. When it exists and goes counter to your opinion and you're a politician, you're not going to talk about it. You're going to have an excuse for it. You're going to bring up other things. The CDC is going to tell you that they green light fully vaccinated people for air travel now if you're fully vaccinated, and there's going to be some weird, not so comfortable ways in which we have to prove those sort of things. In my opinion, there's going to be maybe a laminated different, this is proof that I got this done, and you're going to have your health be scrutinized to a scale that is abnormal for our country. But the CDC says totally okay. You can travel as long as you've been vaccinated, which is good. Obviously, the vaccine is getting us closer and closer to society as we remember it, to daily life as it's supposed to be. And having no mask mandate in Texas, which apparently is also obviously a very daily life as it used to be kind of thing, has not had the ramifications, the negative, that so many people expected it to have. I think it's tremendously interesting that we're not talking about this more. We are instead very focused on things like the trial of Derek Chauvin. And what's very interesting about that trial, and I might have Rich Lenkov on later on in the show to try to talk about this in a little bit better detail if I can get him, or maybe later this week. But the big narrative for many of the politicians on this court case of this individual being tried for whether or not he killed an unarmed black man and acted inappropriately as a police officer, many people who've given testimony, many officers, many colleagues of his have said that absolutely he behaved incorrectly and he did something he never should have done. And obviously the death itself is a tragedy. As we talk about all these things, though, the bigger and scarier narrative to me is whether or not this court case proves that we as a society are racist or not. That what's on trial is a lot more than a certain person and the actions that that person chose to take on that day. What's on trial is all police officers, all law enforcement. What's on trial is all of society. And that makes absolutely no sense. Derek Chauvin does not represent all of society. He cannot. The people who are on the jury panel, however beneficially the lawyers tried to make sure that they weren't biased individuals, may have some bias they bring into it. It's just a fact of life. And whether or not that trial goes one way or another way, based on all the information, it does not mean that we've learned something about our society on a larger scale. It just doesn't. These trials cannot be the only way that we gain that sort of information or claim to gain that sort of information. It just makes no sense. And so as you hear, whether it's the prosecution or any political individual or any other individual go on television and say that this is proof as to whether or not our society is finally evolved, they're just wrong. There's no other way to say it. That's just incorrect. Whether or not Derek Chauvin committed a murder, that's what's on trial. And a lot of people who've seen that video feel that he did. A lot of law enforcement officials who took the stands over the last week feel that he did. Whether or not toxicology reports indicate that drugs were a component to George Floyd's passing is irrelevant, it seems, to a lot of the individuals there, because what he did was way excessive. It was above and beyond what should have happened. He should not have been on the man's neck for as long as he was. And that's what we'll learn. We'll learn as to whether or not the experts, the defense, the prosecution can prove or disprove those concepts. We will not learn whether or not you or I or anyone else that's not a part of this trial is racist. That's just not possible in studying this sort of thing. There's a lot more coming up on the show. I want to have kind of a lighter day because I feel like there's so much intense news out there. And then you see headlines like Amazon had to admit that they're letting some of their drivers go to the bathroom in bottles to make those prime next day deliveries. And how do you not talk about that? A lot of other things coming up too. 7% of Americans don't use the internet. This surprises me. I'll get into more details on that. And obviously, Governor DeSantis in the news for maybe accidentally or purposefully giving a little bit too much of the vaccine to one organization that may have contributed to his campaign. Confusing to break down all the layers there, but it's definitely something that we'll discuss in greater detail as we get through this show here today, because I do think that there's going to be criticisms of that move that are unfair and ones that probably are more fair. It's a significant amount of money they donated to the campaign, but it also is a very valuable place to have vaccines available. It's just the case, as DeSantis actually said when defending himself, when caught up by one of the reporters on this 60-minute story about this idea, is that, this is what everyone wanted, what the public wanted. We'll talk about it more coming up in a bit. Craig Collins filling in on The Chad Benson Show.
The Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. Change your Facebook password. Do it right now. Producer Phil actually told me to do it as soon as I started the show today. 533 million Facebook users' information was posted to a low-level hacking forum out there for the public to see. This information that I guess was originally gained back in 2019, according to Facebook, although I don't know how much you want to trust them for that information. So if you haven't changed your password in a couple years, absolutely change it right now. But that's not all that's out there. It's your full name, location, email address, other biographical information. Your phone number could be accessible if it's something that's tied to your Facebook account. These were things that were confirmed by Business Insider when they read about the story. They actually went through and did a few different things. I'm not even going to tell you how they did them because they shouldn't be telling people how to do them, to confirm the phone numbers are real and whatnot, and they are. So Facebook, 533 million people hacked. This is the problem with big, giant Silicon Valley tech companies having monopolies in the sense of having information on so many people. And that is the business. Don't think it's anything else. The business of Facebook, the business of Twitter, all of them is to gain information and sell it. And I know they're doing more and more to protect your privacy, but still, that's where they make the big money. And so they have all this available on their servers somewhere because they monetize it. And then every so often, some hacker gets in and takes all of it. And obviously, we've seen time and again how horrible and how much identity theft and what have you comes from these sort of things. So first, if you haven't changed it, change the old password. And two, we got to get better. We got to find a way to make these sort of things not as dangerous as they are right now. And I think the only way you do that, truthfully, is by starting down that road that politicians seem to be starting down of breaking up the old monopolies. Something that's happened before with a lot of other companies where they get too big in a certain space that's not well defined yet. And Facebook going in, I remember when I was on that platform in college, never expected to be what it is right now, but it doesn't matter. You deal with the times as they are currently and not whatever the intention was a few years ago. And you also accept the fact that that is a breach that is inappropriate and too high of a risk. I don't know what information you limit moving forward, but obviously there's got to be some sort of reaction to 533 million. I think it's only something like 30 some odd million Americans. This is throughout the entire world, of course, the hack, but still, those numbers should scare us. And those numbers are something that we probably need to mention as much as we can. In other news, a Democrat went after Amazon, saying things about, this is a Democrat out of Wisconsin, saying things about how their drivers specifically are not able to do things like take bathroom breaks because of the need for those products to be same day delivery, next day delivery, what have you, that maybe some of the workers are being treated a little unfairly or a lot unfairly. Amazon's Twitter account, and see, this is something we have to understand. These Twitter accounts, these company accounts, and this is not necessarily a good thing, but it is true. They're run by young people. There may be groups of young people, but they're run by people who might be too quick to react and then not be aware of what they're doing. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying that the next time you get super angry at some company or some celebrity even that did or said something on social media that you don't agree with, for the most part, former presidents excluded from this statement. It's not actually them putting it out there. It's some other individual at the company putting it out there. Amazon tweeted in response to the criticism, you don't really believe the going in the bathroom in the bottles thing, do you? If that were true, nobody would work for us. Then they had to retract it. They said, actually, okay, we're sorry. The tweet was incorrect here. Let me quote them exactly. We know that drivers can and do have trouble finding restrooms because of traffic or sometimes rural routes. And this has been especially the case during COVID when many public restrooms have been closed. The tweet was incorrect. It did not contemplate our large driver population and instead wrongly focused on our fulfillment centers, each of which has had dozens of restrooms for employees that they can use at any time. Yeah, that's a mistake you got to not make. This is an unforced error in the world of Amazon, another giant company that probably needs to be looked at quite closely in a lot of ways. But the giant Amazon of the world, yeah, you maybe. And honestly, my reaction is this one, and I've said this before, I'll say it again. If on the old checkout page for Amazon, if it said to me, do you really want your microwave or whatever it is you just bought next day, or can you let the person delivering it to you go to the restroom and it might be there 2 days from now, I would accept that. I would say, okay, or maybe I just buy local because that's something that helps all our economies in the places in which we live. So maybe if you need something next day, you just go to a store and buy it. I don't know. And then people can go to the bathroom in the ways that humans are used to going and not the other way. Although, if we're going to be honest in the trust tree for a second, if you're a guy, some of us may have at one point in our lives used the old bottle technique. I'm just saying, I'm not admitting it's me. I'm not going to put that out there. But yes, maybe as a kid, maybe if mom doesn't want to pull over on the long trip from Indiana to New Jersey or back and forth on a long travel, she may or may not have told one of her children to try to go in the old bottle. That might have happened. I'm not saying it did. I'm just saying it could have. I actually now sound like Hunter Biden, don't I? Let's get to that real quick. Hunter Biden audio, and I know I played this already because this broke on Friday, even though this was part of the interview. This is the best part of the interview to me. A lot of the rest of the interview covered his drug addiction, the way in which his family helped him cope with it, get over it, and how pervasive drug addiction is, which is very humanizing, certainly, for Hunter Biden. But I don't know if that's as much of public interest as whether or not his laptop is his and whether or not it said some really terrible things on it. Oh, by the way, he's definitely cooperating with anyone that's investigating his finances. But listen to this clip from that interview, from one of his two CBS interviews in the morning, where he talked about how it might or could kind of be his laptop.
Was that your laptop?
For real, I don't know.
I know, but you know that's this is.
I really don't know. Okay. The answer is
you don't know yes or no if the laptop.
I don't have
was
any
yours.
Idea. I have no idea.
So could have been yours.
Of course, certainly. There could be a laptop out there that was stolen from me. There could be that I was hacked. It could be that it was Russian intelligence. It could be that it was stolen from me.
I just can't get over that audio. I'll play it again and again forever, even though I have no more reactions to it other than, really? You have no idea? It could be. It might have been. I think I even saw one take from a psychologist on social media. See, I talked about how bad it was 2 minutes ago, and now I'm on it using it about how this is classic defense conversation, classical ways in which you try to avoid a question by not actually saying no, but trying to indicate no, which is exactly what he did, and he failed. One other person being challenged a lot is Ron DeSantis. DeSantis, right now, Governor DeSantis out of Florida, people are accusing him of a pay-for-play scam, that he had money from Publix donated to his campaign, not presidential, his governor campaign, and that because of that, he has given the vaccine to that organization, and not others. He has defended himself. The 60 Minutes piece, which was very in-depth, and I don't know if entirely unbiased. I think there might have been some bias there. But he defended himself when the reporter on that piece actually caught him at an event by saying it's wrong, it's a fake narrative. I just disabused you of the narrative and you don't care about the facts because obviously I just laid it out for you in a way that is irrefutable. So clearly it's not. What he said actually, as far as the facts are concerned, is that he met with the county mayor, he met with the administration, he met with folks in Palm Beach County and said, here are your options. You can do more drive-through sites. You can do hospitals providing the vaccine to people. You can do more grocery stores and Publix. And they said, we would like to go with what's easiest for our residents, which appears to be going to the grocery store and getting it done there. So again, potentially fake narrative, or at least a defense that's different than Biden's. If it had been Hunter Biden, he'd be like, I don't know, maybe I could have done that. I might not have done that. I don't remember. It's like the soap opera version. I have amnesia right now. I remember nothing except this moment we're in right now. DeSantis didn't go that road. He said that this is a fake narrative and he can prove it. So we'll see how that plays out. We'll see how much more information is talked about there because I think that's an interesting and intriguing challenge to whether or not it makes sense. And by the way, this is just the last thing I feel about that. Why throw a flag in the middle of the play? To me, this whole vaccine rollout thing, and at least if you listen to politicians, and getting people vaccinated is far more important than taking a politician down for the way in which he chose to get it out there. There's no timetable. You can challenge this a year, a month, a week from now. You can give it time. Challenging it in the moment now when we're still trying to get the vaccine in the arms of all the people that want it seems to be politically motivated as opposed to news motivated, because you can sit on this story. It is okay in the world of news. I want to tell everybody who thinks that you got to break things first and right away and all the time, it's okay to sit on a thing. Not even because you feel it's inappropriate or whatever to release it, but just so you get all your facts right. It's okay to wait a little more and not tweet it right away. This is my opinion. I don't know if 60 Minutes uses it all the time. I don't know why I'm ending every segment with this is my opinion, but Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
You stink like fear and white male privilege to me.
I do often out myself verbally as a gender. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm proud to be a gender.
Are you stupid? What? Are you kidding me?
Not a great way to use your white privilege.
Some people get it, some people don't.
You're listening to The Chad Benson Show.
This is The Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. The box office had a heck of a winner over the holiday period. Godzilla versus Kong. I think it's sort of funny that what fixes the box office problem, at least according to this article I'm reading, by the way, they made $48.5 million. Not huge in regular box office terms, but certainly big compared to any pandemic numbers we've seen. The only other movie that did even remotely close to it was Wonder Woman 1984 in the last however many months, and that only made $16 million over a Christmas holiday. This made $48.5 million, as I said, from its Wednesday opening, including $32 million on the Easter 3-day weekend. Just have two ridiculous fake creatures fight each other. I've watched this movie because it's free on HBO Max. I did not pay to go into a movie theater and see it. And it's everything you think that is. Godzilla fights King Kong. There's not a lot of narrative that makes it make a tremendous amount of sense. They journey to the center of the earth at one point, which also very much confused me. And then they just fight each other. And there's a robotic Godzilla, which I feel like I'm now spoiling something. So spoiler alert for anyone that cares about the Kong or the Godzilla versus Kong spoilers. Excuse me for almost mispronouncing that. But there's a mecha Godzilla in it too. It's just gratuitous, silly. I had a great time. I enjoyed it, and I get why people went and saw it in the theater. But it is funny that we worry about if some things are going to come back after the pandemic is over, if some things are going to return to how normal they are. And yeah, I think movie theaters will be okay as long as we keep putting out silly, ridiculous things. In other news, I saw a couple accidentally painted over a $500,000 piece of art. This is a real story. The couple, I guess, was trying to reinterpret the art. As I say that, I feel like that's the kind of thing that someone should have told them was a bad idea. They didn't know that what they were doing would actually tremendously tank the value of said piece of art. The damaged 95 by 275 inch piece, which was painted originally by an artist from Paris, John One, is now worth absolutely nothing. The original value, $500,000. How do you get over that with the misses? Like, say you did something like this, you made an error to this extent, you cost yourself this much money as far as the value of the items you own in the home. I can see my wife getting very, very upset, even if she's part of the process, even if she's in on it and they did it together. So thank God for that. If just one of the two members of this couple had done this on their own as a surprise, oh man, the fight that would have transpired then. But as you see, I guess that you shouldn't reinterpret things that you pay $500,000 for. You should probably just let them sit on a table. One other story that I thought was interesting, I like to bounce around on some of the sillier topics of the day every so often. A TikTok user by the name What's Up, I'm Jared, although this is a woman who also goes by Lo on the platform, has gone viral. She has a response to anyone that hits on her or catcalls her in the public, in the world of walking around in public. What she does, she barks at them like a dog. She doesn't respond. She put out video. I'm not going to play it because I don't know that it really enhances this story all that much. She wrote with her audio how to properly deal with men. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's the most aggressive, but it's not, it's just barking at somebody. And it seems to be working. She's getting praised all over social media for this. This is a great response. I'll keep using it, someone said, although I take particular interest in the word keep. Someone else said, normalize barking at men. Great. And look, I'm not going to advocate for the catcallers. I don't think that they're the people making the smartest of decisions in our society. But it is also weird that the Bark Back initiative has gotten so much popularity or gotten so much traction. And it's probably not, actually. Now that I think about it, for a woman to bark at dudes on street corners and put that out on social media, that's exactly what social media is for. And I say this every time I find one of these crazy stories. This is why businesses can't make their decisions based on what Twitter is saying. Because the other thing that's popular on Twitter right now is a girl barking at people. That's the other thing or at least TikTok, something that's making the rounds. So when you, business owner, decide whether or not it's appropriate for you to make your next big decision on a product or the name of something based on what people on social media are telling you, just know that. Or maybe this story actually better demonstrates that idea. Cash Me Outside Girl, that's her name. I don't think she said catch me outside. I think she said cash me outside, who wanted to fight somebody. On an episode of Dr. Phil a couple years ago, I think she's also become a rapper. Her name is Danielle. She recently turned 18 and joined the adult website OnlyFans. And here's why I'm telling you this story. Not for any perverse reason. It's because she made $1 million in 6 hours. This woman became somewhat popular on the internet for getting upset with people in a crowd at a Dr. Phil show, turned it into some form of a rapping career, and now is a millionaire in a period of 6 hours by being on the site. I mean, do we ever take a step back as a society as a whole? Like, do we ever give ourselves a timeout as all of society and say we need a break from some of the things that we're doing? I'm not telling you how to spend your money. I mean, if you want to be a part of that, that's whatever. It's up to you. At the same time, that shouldn't happen. No one should be capable of making that much money that quickly. And I've had several friends now tell me they'd like to try out the OnlyFans. I don't think it's going to work out for all of us the way it worked out for her. I am not making the career change to hop on that website. It's just surreal. It's surreal that it's 6 hours. I don't know why that adds to it, too. That it's not even an entire day. That it took her a few hours to make a ton of money. And I don't know what she's going to do with it. There's no word on what Bad Babby or Barbie or however you say her name. I don't know much about her, as you can tell. And I am not part of the OnlyFans. And she's only making more since. The fact that this article says that she made that first million in a short amount of time doesn't mean that there's not more millions to come. And this is actually, I guess, the second time that this website has seen something as big as this. Bella Thorne, a famous actress, the other one, Disney, is one of the places where she made her name, had made $1 million in 24 hours. Now it only takes 6 hours for Cash Me Outside Girl, which is, again, just such a ridiculous thing to even say. The way in which I describe this human is one of the many reasons why it probably shouldn't have gone as well as it did. But oh well, that's the world we all live in. We deserve a timeout, society. And I'm going to take a timeout in just a second. After I do, I will tell you how a psychologist has revealed the ways to stop procrastinating. There's a lot of ways out there that apparently you can do that. Walmart shopper was subdued, maskless, after threatening to attack other people. I'm not sure that this story is being reported exactly the way that it actually occurred. And the Miami Beach mayor is saying that maybe bars don't need to be open until 5 a.m. Maybe 2 a.m. is enough. Not a lot of great things happen in bars if you're in them after 2 a.m. Outside of maybe the revenue. I'm sure the revenue of the establishment is fairly valuable, and maybe those businesses get to make that decision if they want their waiters to have to deal with the people who are in there at 2 a.m. This is Craig Collins filling in on The Chad Benson Show.
This is The Chad Benson Show. Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. Chad will be back tomorrow. There was another attack on the Capitol just the other day. This didn't happen today. I don't want this to sound like I'm setting it up wrong. Unfortunately, this happened on Friday. A police officer did die. Obviously, since this is now the second time that I can say the sentence, there was an attack on the Capitol, it feels as though we need to be at a place to fix this sort of problem, to make security better so that things like this can't happen. Representative Tim Ryan, a Democrat out of Ohio, doesn't think that's such an easy process.
Well, when you're talking about hiring 800 new police officers or 1,000 new police officers, you need 18 resumes for every one person that you're going to hire. This is not something that we have a magic wand and we're going to be able to wave it overnight. Same with the fencing. What kind of fencing? We want fencing that we can immediately dispatch and put out there rather quickly. Do we want fencing that goes into the ground and then be tricked?
I'm sorry. When you start to talk about things like this as if they're challenges, they can't be challenges. It can't be this difficult to protect the Capitol better. I know that some people have weighed in and said that attacks in the Capitol, for whatever reason, seem to be increasing. That is obviously very unfortunate. The person who did this is not necessarily a person that I guess we're going to talk about as much in the news. Had it been a different individual, someone tied somehow to former President Trump, it was a African-American man who decided to attack the Capitol by ramming his car into the area. So I hope that Ryan is wrong and that fixing this problem is much, much quicker and much, much easier than some are making it sound as though it is. But truthfully, the more worrisome component to all this is not necessarily whether or not a prevalence and an uptick in this sort of thing will continue to happen. But the more worrisome component is that it happens at all, and that the success of it apparently causes people like another U.S. police officer to lose their life. It just makes no sense to me, and it's something that we need to find a way to prevent to the best of our abilities. But here, this is probably part of the reason why maybe it's so challenging to fix a problem that seems as straightforward as that one. We don't agree on a lot of things, and we can't agree on things easily as a society at all. Case in point, this week, George Stephanopoulos, his panel is on. Chris Christie, one of those members, trying to say something about the Georgia voting rule, the voting law, that may or may not be accurately portrayed in a lot of other media places, and it caused a bit of a fight.
It expands early voting in Georgia. The president said it ended it. Listen, here's what Joe Biden's got to live with when he wakes up this morning on Easter morning. He is doing exactly what he sat around in the campaign and the transition accused Donald Trump of doing. He is lying to cause racial divisions in this country. That's what he accused Donald Trump of doing, and he's a liar and a hypocrite.
How do you explain why Major League Baseball is making the move?
It's a business judgment, George. It's a business judgment. Major League Baseball has to make a decision about what is in their best business interests. I'm sure that's what. I haven't spoken to anybody there, but I'm sure it's what it is.
Doesn't that suggest that there's something wrong with the law?
No, what it suggests is that's the climate in this country right now.
You should
that's
ask
the climate,
the people
what it
who
is.
know. You should ask the people who know. I've been doing voter protection for 10 years. Just the idea that you can't give people water in line. I've helped people's babies.
That's just not true. That's not true.
I have helped.
It's about to get crazy as far as the audio goes, everybody arguing with each other. And yet all the points made by former Governor Christie make sense, at least to me. And honestly, even that water comment, it's skewed as to what is and isn't allowed. The state of Georgia can give anybody water that's voting for any reason. They can put that out on their own. Political groups, politically opinionated individuals who are members of groups that have political interests can't give you gifts. It's just like an NCAA player can't take a bribe from you to play for your school. You can't give someone something well in line and then also casually mention, oh, by the way, I'm part of the Democratic Party. I guess we're out here giving you water and Republicans aren't. That might sway their opinion. That might sway their vote a certain way because they were just handed. It's so crazy that we have to argue about these things as if they're one-sided when they're not. They're complex issues that deserve to be talked about in greater detail. And if laws get passed by politicians that don't work, they get to be reevaluated and changed. That's where we should be as a society, not here.
You can't do electioneering. Excuse me.
In order to enfranchise the vote.
I'm sorry, that's just wrong.
Do it by all.
Well, within 20, I think it's
150 feet. Where in New Jersey, in Chicago, and any place else in the country, he's saying partisan groups cannot do electioneering by giving out food and water. And in Georgia, bill says that there can be water provided by the state of Georgia, just not by partisan groups.
George.
And this is the kind of stuff.
That's a stupid part of the bill, but it's not a threat to democracy.
It's not. It's not a threat to democracy. It's not. And that's part of the problem, too, is the way in which we all have to talk about this now to get attention. And I don't know what caused that. I'll continue to say it's social media that caused it, but maybe it's something else. A Walmart shopper was subdued by another man when an altercation happened because he wasn't wearing a mask. I guess the guy who was maskless also refused to take a temperature test, or maybe no. You know what? Actually, let me take that back. I think that's another story out of Disney World. I have two of these stories. This man just didn't want to wear a mask, and he started to say that anyone who came toward him while he was maskless was going to get attacked. He was going to assault somebody, and one of the people in the Walmart in Seattle actually did subdue the man. In the footage, the suspect, identified as 29-year-old Troy Robinson, is first seen ignoring Walmart employees who attempt to escort him out of the store before a 21-year-old shopper intervenes. Police say the suspect had been threatening to assault anyone who touched me, which is cash me outside, apparently, which is when the 21-year-old stepped in and confronted. Now, my biggest problem with this story, and you should have some, is that it's two individuals taking matters into their own hands. And in this case, it only ended in a fight. But it's been the biggest problem, I think, as far as the stories that never end with people that disagree with certain mandates and don't do things that businesses tell them to do, is that inevitably you have like street justice. And what I mean by that is no one in law enforcement involved in this at all, just two people fighting each other. Or you have an angry person throwing a bunch of stuff on the ground at a Target and threatening a Target employee. None of this makes sense. None of this is the right way to go about this. And I don't know if there's a better path with police in force. Obviously, that's not necessarily the right move. But it's a shame that we keep seeing stories like this and situations in which, for whatever reason, this one individual wanted to go shopping without a mask on and then wanted to threaten to fight people if they forced him to put a mask on, which the business is allowed to do. I will say that businesses can make their own decisions on this, and then have another 21-year-old kid decide to subdue him, which is a weird word to choose too, because if he wasn't actually attacking anyone, is he being subdued? But I don't want to turn into AOC and start to break down words a little bit more than I should. I saw this story totally pivoting, totally shifting gears because I need the break. I need a bit of a breather. A city has banned people from walking up and down escalators. This is a small city outside of Tokyo, Japan. They said that they need people to stand stationary. I mean, we discussed the mask thing. Like that is a invasion of our ability to make choices as individuals. Whether or not you walk on an escalator should probably never be government controlled. And yet it is. And I can't even envision how this is actually executed Do you start having police officers show up to every escalator? Do you start writing down the names of people who move a little bit too much while on them? And more importantly, I like to move while on any sort of moving path, be it at the airport or on an escalator, because I get there even faster. If you enhance my speed and make me feel like a superhero, this makes me a happy human, and I buy in. I would absolutely get arrested in this place in Japan if I were to take an escalator for any reason, because it's silly. You don't have to walk, by the way. I'm not going to force everybody else to do it, but it's silly to just stand there. You're capable of moving, and you can get there even quicker. But I think just a lot of people were bored. I think as far as this lawsuit or this legal decision goes, the politicians who passed whatever rule this is in Japan were probably bored. The police officers probably didn't have a lot to do because it's a small community. So now we're going to police escalators. Thank God we live in the country we live in, right? I mean, for everything, for all the flaws, for all the problems we have and all the things where maybe government oversteps, no one is ever going to tell you whether it's your right or not. It'll always be your right to go ahead and walk on it. And if you don't walk, by the way, just a pro tip, you're supposed to move to the right. So somebody who's walking can go by you on the left. This is the big city rules. I don't know if it's always what happens in all the communities, but hey, that's just me. All right, quick break, a lot more in a bit. Greg Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
If you're part of the politically exhausted majority, don't fear. Your time to be validated and rejuvenated is here. Wake up. It's the Chad Benson Show.
This is the Chad Benson Show. Right now making the rounds on social media. What does it feel like when you get older? I guess also, what is middle-aged? People are saying 47 is the magic number for when you're officially middle-aged. I don't know if everyone's going to agree with that. I can see some people not. But here are the common answers to the ailments that hit you that make you, all right, I'm not as young as I used to be. First, and this is worded a little oddly, the phrasing's not perfect. Feeling stiff is something that people will feel as they get older. Groaning when you bend down. Do you make noises? I'm just asking. You can't answer. This is a radio show. It's a one-way conversation. When you bend over, I do. And my wife, she gets mad at me all the time. When I stand up from sitting, I will make the noise every so often. A noise I probably shouldn't make out of context too often on the old radio. But I get yelled at for that. Not in a mean way, but like, really? You need to make... Yes, they just come out. I'm not doing them on purpose. This isn't a rehearsed thing. It just happens. And I guess when you start to groan and make those noises, that's officially hitting the old middle-aged as far as ailments go. Picking comfort over style when it comes to clothing. Yes, everybody should do this. I'm not saying that I don't enjoy it when someone... rather attractive, is dressed all fancy. I'm a man. I can enjoy those kind of things. At the same time, I would never make that decision. I would never go the road of those kind of shoes or items. I always dress for comfort. They make fun of people like Adam Sandler for showing up at a red carpet wearing sweatpants. Wouldn't you? If you were somebody of that stature who was making his own movies and could make money off of movies that are thought of as bad by pretty much all critics who see it, why not just show up at the red carpet in sweatpants? Who cares at that point? Thinking police officers, teachers, and doctors look really young is something that apparently is indicative of old age or getting older, is when you start to go around professionals that are in those marquee positions. They're like, oh, those kids are so young. I think I've said that too. Hating loud bars. I don't know. A lot of this list now, I'm getting very upset. A lot of things on there. A loud bar is not fun, but I guess I'm middle-aged. Needing an afternoon nap, which I don't think I need them, but they're glorious and lovely when you take them. Some other ones that made the list, realizing you have some coworkers who don't know what a cassette tape is. Come on, show of hands. You have to know what it is. I feel like sometimes people play up the whole, I'm such a kid, I don't know that sort of thing. Although actually, and I know I've talked about this on the radio before, my favorite demonstration of just the way in which things change one generation to the next is to ask a kid how to do the phone on their hand, how to make a gesture, how to make their hand look like a phone. Because any child, anyone born in the smartphone generation will do a flat hand. If you're like, show me with your hand what a phone looks like, boom, it's a flat little thing. And if you ask anyone older than that, you immediately put the pinky and the thumb out so that you have the receiver, you have everything that a typical telephone has. And that's just such a weird thing. If someone told me to do a hand gesture for phone, I immediately go, with the full pinky and thumb out move, and I am apparently old now for that too. Knowing your limit when you consume drinks is another one that indicates you're getting older. I definitely know a bunch of people who would be on the other side of 47 that still have not learned that lesson. So I'm not sure that that's a fair one. Hope you get asked to be ID'd places. That's another one that I guess indicates that you're older. I definitely fall into that category too. And I've mentioned I'm a millennial on this show. I'm in my 30s, but it's still fun when somebody asks you for an ID for something that you haven't needed to prove for a while. And it doesn't happen to me as much as it actually didn't even happen to me on my 21st birthday. I remember, and I don't know why I'm telling this story now to the radio, but hey, it's happening. I remember going out to a restaurant with friends in college the night of my 21st birthday, ordering a beer and having no one check my ID. And some of the people I were with were even younger than me. They're like 19 years old. They looked it, I thought, but they were like, the dad's with his friends. I don't know. It was very disappointing, very sad. So it can happen at any age. Survey, just so you know. Giving people speeches on saving and investing is one last thing that's also an indication that you're getting older. And then actually this story too, which is not the same survey, but a different one. 7% of Americans don't use the internet at all, according to a new Pew Research Center study. This took place from January 25th to February 8th of 2021. How is that possible? In the post-pandemic world in which we live, not just the internet as it existed in 2019 or before, but in 2020, how did you navigate life without the internet? 7% of people. I have to know. Someone has to tell me on our social media pages. Go to the Chad Benson Show page, go to the Craig Collins Show page, and tell me how you make it in this world now, in today's world, in the world we just lived through, without any interest in the internet. And I'm not trying to say it's a great place. I'm not trying to advocate for it, but it's unavoidable to most of us. The cell phone has it for the most part, although I know many a person who still have a dumb phone. But if that's not it, email, all these things exist. It might be a lovely life, though, to be honest, to go through that life where you don't have any connection to the internet at all, where you still like get a phone call from the landline phone, and that's the only way people reach you. That's not bad. I'm not saying this seems like a bad life. I'm just amazed it still exists. And especially, as I said, after the year we all just went through. Oh, and one last little tip. I'm just going to give you one more tip. A psychologist said how you avoid procrastinating, and it's going to make a lot of people mad because it definitely just sounds like you continue procrastinating while trying to, quote unquote, avoid it. But you need to get in touch with your emotions. That's what the psychologist said. This is an article in Forbes that's gone viral. You need to first regulate the emotions that made you procrastinate in the first place. Then you need to forgive yourself for the action of procrastinating because of those emotions you're now in touch with. And then finally, stage 3 is to do the job. I can tell you without even looking it up that this psychologist is most likely a millennial because nothing more overcomplicates a problem than this step-by-step process. And I've heard a time or two that millennials are great at being in touch with their emotions, not so great at fixing the problem of something like, say, anxiety. And this is why, in order to clean up your room, you got to first focus on your emotions and why you're not doing it. Second, forgive yourself. You're not a bad guy. You just didn't clean up your room. And then finally, clean up your room. I think anyone in a generation beyond, say, or even an age, I don't even know. Actually, I don't even want to throw anything out there because I think this is ludicrous, would tell you that this is the dumbest thing they've heard. And I feel that way. I feel like this is absolutely outrageous. And if anybody did it in front of me, I can tell you that I would have a problem. And honestly, if I ever did this in front of my wife, too, I'm sure I would get hit by a shoe. My wife is from Mexico. I've told people on, I think, the radio before, she throws shoes when you step out of hand. She's actually as accurate as Hawkeye from the Avengers with her shoes. And if I were to get in touch with my emotions before doing the dishes, I'm pretty sure I'd be shooed right in the forehead many, many times in a row, actually, because that's just, it makes no sense. This is my tip to anyone out there. If you procrastinate, don't. There we go. Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
The Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins, filling in. Happy to be here. Also happy to have Rich Lenkov on the line. He is a lawyer out of Chicago. He is also the co-host of Legal Face Off, a very good podcast on all things legal. Some fun, some obviously not as fun, from WGN Plus. Rich, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Craig. I appreciate it.
Thrilled to have you on. So let's get right to it. The legal topic of the day for a lot of people, including everyone who works at CNN apparently, is the George Floyd, the Derek Chauvin case. Tell me, what is your reaction to what you've heard so far, what you've seen in the first week? A lot of what I've read is that prosecution did an incredible job of setting the table for the things that Derek Chauvin did wrong and the ways in which he's probably going to be found guilty of a crime.
Yeah, well, understanding, Craig, that the video tells most of the story in this case, and you'd have to be, really incompetent to screw that up. I would say the prosecution has done a near perfect job in the first week of testimony, presenting the evidence, letting the witnesses tell their story to the jury, I should say. The one thing a couple things I think I would do differently is I would not let them speak for as long as they have. I think we saw some of the testimony from the witnesses, particularly bystanders, really drag on. I'm a fan of getting to the point really early with juries. I think jurors have limited attention spans. And, if you're watching it on TV and you're bored, you can rest assured that the jury is going to be bored as well. But for that, I think, as I said, the video tells most of the story, the videos, and the trial has gone pretty well for the state.
See, one, that's why you're such a good radio guest, because getting to the point is important in all platforms. Two, as you just said there, the videos, this is an unprecedented, it seems in some ways, amount of just information to be available via video for prosecution, as you said, to use for people to consume. All of the jury, of course, had to have seen this most likely before becoming one of the jury members. It seems sort of surreal that there's so much video evidence to help with this case.
Yeah, fairly unprecedented, to your point, to have this much video, especially on a trial of this scale, right? And we've seen so many different angles, from the body cam to Inside Cup Foods to the now infamous video that we've all seen. But even if people saw the video before, we only saw 8.5 minutes before. We thought it was that long. Well, now we know it's 9:26. So there's that. There's the first time that we heard ever from Derek Chauvin. There's the dash cam video where we see him speaking after Floyd has already been taken away, and Chauvin, in my opinion, appears very nonchalant about what just happened. We see different angles of the bystanders. So it's all really damaging video, I think, to the defense.
Well, now let me ask you the biggest question, the question that every politician is throwing out there and that a lot of people say on the news. Does this trial actually indicate whether or not society as a whole is racist? And that's as simplistically as I can put the question. There's so many people that say that the outcome of this case is indicative as to whether or not race relations have progressed in our country. I obviously feel that that's a tremendously flawed idea going into any trial, especially one like this that already has such heightened opinions and heightened awareness. But what are your thoughts on the idea that this could tell us more about our society than really as to whether or not Derek Chauvin committed a crime?
Yeah, I don't buy into that either. I think that's misplaced. I think that's putting an undue burden on the jury. And in fact, an unethical one. Any trial attorney will tell you that any judge in the world would not allow you to get up before a jury, before they go back to the box, and say, ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to do has greater societal impact. And if you don't find for my client, if you don't find in this case for the state, then, you're doing a travesty of justice. You are not advancing racial relations. You have a duty to society. All that stuff is never allowed in. For good reason, because you need to focus the jury on this one case, on their charge in hand, which is to decide this case's evidence based on what's been presented in this case, not as a referendum has been. This is for the Floyd family said, not a referendum on race relations. So I don't think it is. Listen, our country has survived through a lot of tumult, a lot of race division. It'll continue regardless of whether the outcome of this trial.
All right, let's talk about President Biden's dog and the amount of people that dog has bitten. Let's just shift gears entirely if we can, Rich. This is the second staff member to be bitten by Major, President Biden's dog. Does something happen now legally? What's the next step as far as the dog has to be removed from the White House at least, right?
I mean, this Major Biden is on a tear, Craig. Just lots of biting incidents. The second one was reported last week. And I mean, there's a law in many states. Illinois has one. Most importantly, D.C. has a law that says that basically you get one free dog bite as an owner. That might seem a little strange, but from a civil perspective, Joe Biden is might be sued by the person who the dog bit the second time. Now, in reality, that will never happen. Number one, because I think it was a White House employee, and number two, there's actually a argument that Joe Biden, like we heard in the Trump administration, cannot be sued for actions while he's in office. If you take that a step further, the action that was in office was his negligence in allowing Major to bite a second person. But the two dog bite rule basically means that as an owner, you are not on notice that your dog has a proclivity to biting people until they do. So after they bite someone for the first time, you're not going to win that case on a civil basis. The second time, however, the law says, listen, you knew about it and you put that dog out there anyway, then you're liable.
I can't imagine the amount of people that got bit the first time by a dog that inevitably gets sued and is mad about that rule. They're like, if that other guy got money, why can't I have some? That's sort of surreal.
Right.
And yet I think that they just got to figure out a way. I heard that it was a nip. By the way, I think the press secretary said it was just a nip and that just Major's learning the new surroundings. So it's not a big deal. It's not a big bite. It's just a little nip.
Just a little nip by a rabid Biden dog running around and nipping people. But, yeah, I mean, listen, you raise a good point, right? And the question always is, what are the damages? Anytime you have any lawsuit in general, personal injury, while liability might seem adverse, and again, this might be a two-dog bite case where it is adverse, you always have to look at the damages. And to your point, just a nip, that is not generally worth a lot of money. But, you see lots of dog bite cases get lots of money, in my opinion, ridiculously, because I defend a lot of those cases, in fact. So.
Wow. Well, no, honestly, you see like any car crash that seems like it's not a big deal and someone get out holding their neck. I imagine a nip to one person is not a nip to all. And that is what we've learned on this show. Thank you, Rich Lenkov, for joining us. You are a co-host on Legal Face Off. It is a podcast put out every other week by WGN Plus. A really great show. You got to check it out. You have another one, too. I forgot to mention it before, but what is the other show you're doing?
The other podcast that we have is called Trial by Vinyl, completely different. It's a debate about the greatest albums by various rock bands in history. So me and Mike Heidemann, who we take opposite sides, and I defend one album, he defends the other. We have great guests. Everyone from, rock stars to journalists to professors. Our fourth episode deals with Led Zeppelin, and that will be taping in a couple of weeks.
Wow. I imagine you actually get more reactions to your takes on music than you do your takes on legal things from the two podcasts you do. I imagine it gets much more inflamed on social media when you have the wrong musical take.
Absolutely. A lot more passionate music fans than legal fans.
There you go. Well, that's fine. Thank you, as always, for joining us, though, Rich. I look forward to talking to you again soon. I have to take a break. This is the Craig Collins version of the Chad Benson Show. Chad is back tomorrow.
Don't let the Washington Beltway strangle you. This is where the exhausted majority comes to refuel, realign, and reevaluate. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins, filling in. You don't know that something is like an obvious thing. You make sense. You think it would happen more often than it does until you see it happen once. It doesn't dawn on you that some things shouldn't be as rare as they seem to be. And I know I'm about to describe a video on the radio, which is, you're not supposed to do that. Radio 101. Don't just talk about a video no one can see. But you could go see it. Facebook.com/Craig Collins Show. I put it up there just now. It's going to be up on other platforms, I assume, throughout There's a dog in Russia watching some newswoman give a report live on the scene. And the microphone she's holding, which looks like, a bone or anything else you might go and fetch, is just snagged right out of her hand by the dog. It's hilarious to me. She's mid-sentence in her report. The dog's head pops into the video, puts the mouth on the microphone, and takes off. And then the cameraman, to me, is the MVP of all of it, because he turns the camera to follow the dog, which is probably a human reaction, as the woman, the reporter, then chases the dog down the street, trying to get her microphone back. It is hilarious. It's on my social media pages, as I said, or at least hilarious to me. You should check it out. You're not going to understand it. I would play the audio, but it's all in Russian. It doesn't make any sense. And then even the person in the studio, when they cut back to the studio, is like, well, she's got to chase that dog. She'll be back in a minute to finish her report. How does that not happen more? It does. Like if you're out walking a dog in the street and someone's maybe a little bit too much motion in the old microphone, that looks like you're playing fetch. I am not surprised. And I can't believe that we don't have like daily occurrences of this. Also, and this is audio, so look, now I'm doing my job correctly. A family decided to surprise their kids by having someone in the family dress up as the Easter Bunny. But as this audio demonstrates, that's not always terribly believable. If the bunny is obviously not a bunny and a human in a costume, you might terrify a child. Now, warning here, this audio is just pretty much of kids screaming, but something just amuses me deep in my heart because, one, I think the kids will get over it. I'm not happy about kids who might be partially traumatized. I doubt all that seriously. But two, just the error in the ways of executing this as far as the parents go, because you wanted to surprise your kids with a surprise from the Easter Bunny, and then something else happened. Oh, hold on, let me play this again.
Ready?
That's not the Easter Bunny!
They take off running.
Oh my God!
Go! Those are some afraid children, and I apologize. I had the wrong button pushed. You didn't hear it the first time. I was listening to it alone via the dead air. That's definitely not me doing my job right. But it's so funny because the little girl is like, that's not the Easter Bunny, as if no one is aware. No one else around. She's breaking the news and then trying to hightail it. She might have just seen the Kong vs. Godzilla movie and is aware that some monsters could live in the world. By the way, check out that movie if you haven't. It did some pretty good numbers at the box office, including the fact that we're in a pandemic. But is this funny to everybody? I don't know. It's funny to me. Just the fact that the kids are so afraid of the Easter Bunny, and someone's got to feel awful. Whoever is inside that costume is like, well, this has been a missed opportunity. Every part of this was pretty much failed as much as it possibly could here, and we feel very, very bad about all the facets going on, and we would like to immediately apologize. I mean, how do you even get over that? I assume you just take the mask off and you're like, no, it's me. I'm not the Easter Bunny, as you obviously noticed. I'm a human in a costume, and I'm sorry. And then also those kids, I wonder if they could ever do something like go to Disney World. I imagine they can't. They're going to be very afraid of every animal that's not actually an animal, but a dude in an animal costume, because that's not going to go well. I'm going to shift gears to something a little more serious just because, I don't know, I probably need to talk about those things too. I saw this op-ed that was published, I think, on Friday in the New York Times. And here's the title of the op-ed, and this is why it's important. I used to think the remedy for bad speech was more speech. Not anymore. The person who wrote this said, I used to believe that the remedy for, misinformation or anything else was just to keep communicating. Now they think that is a very outdated idea. Just as the founders never envisioned how the right of the well-regulated militia to own I can't even read all that. Slow-loading muskets could never be applied to the weapons of today. They also never foresaw the amount of ability we'd all have to communicate. It is surreal. The comparison's made here. It's surreal the conversation's made. The idea being that the way in which we grow as a society now is for most of us to not talk. I think I said earlier on, I think I said this the other day when I was on for Chad Benson, that every so often there's an issue that comes up where a company or someone else feels a need to be so woke. They have an opinion on it. They have an idea and they throw their idea out there. In those instances, I think it makes sense to not feel the need to weigh in on every single issue. But if you desire to speak, the answer should always be you're allowed to have a voice because our country gives you that right. Whether or not it's going to be the right business decision is something entirely different. in my opinion. And I don't think it's always as obvious as the businesses seem to think it is. But truthfully, you should never call for people to not be able to utilize their First Amendment right of the freedom of speech. And the fact that this is published in the New York Times is also kind of surreal to me, a publication that was attacked relentlessly by our former president, President Donald Trump, for being misinformation, for being fake news, defending themselves, defending their journalistic ability to report on any and all issues. And then you get down to where we are now, and they have an op-ed posted talking about how maybe voices shouldn't be heard. Really? A news organization like that being willing to allow someone to try to convince others to be quiet for the sake of society? That it's surreal. The way in which that it depends on who you agree and who you disagree with, right? If the guy that you like is in office now, then the world today is a much better place than it was a few months or years ago. And so in those situations, now you can be less or more tolerant to certain things. That's how it works. If the guy that you want is not in power, well, your actions, your voice have to be of the utmost importance. I know it is just an op-ed. I know it's not necessarily the opinion of the New York Times, but they allowed their platform to be utilized to publish something that I think is utterly reckless, in the sense that, I know now I'm using my own super strong language for something that's just a piece in a newspaper. But at the same time, it's just such a danger to start to advocate those things instead of what all of us know to be the correct response, which is to continue communicating. You are capable of sitting there, listening to someone who doesn't have your opinion for however long they want to provide their opinion, and then giving your opinion back, neither of you agreeing with each other and ending the conversation. That's something we all need to be capable of doing. And not hearing opposing thoughts, opposing opinions doesn't mean they don't exist. Just by asking people to be quiet doesn't mean we all agree all of a sudden. And it doesn't mean that people who disagree are any better off because you've told them to be less than vocal about their opinion. All right, I'll shift gears back for a quick second before we got to take a break. I saw that the Friends reunion is finally going to air. It's finally going to tape its special, which should air on HBO Max. During the pandemic, a lot of people on social media were begging for just a little bit more Friends. I guess it's one of the many things you turn to and watch a lot when you're stuck at home as much as you are. Now that we're on our way out of the pandemic, hopefully, knock on wood, as more and more vaccines and other returns to normalcy happen. And I know that people have been issuing that stern warning that bad times could be immediately in our future. Well, a little bit further down the road than any of that, I know we're back to normal. You will have a Friends special that you can check out. I don't know if all the people will be in it. I don't know that all 6 actors are completely confirmed to be in the entire special. I believe that they are. Some of them have changed more than others, so it'll also be interesting to see all of those faces if you were a fan of Friends, and I know that there's a lot of fans out there. And there's, most importantly, I guess, the fact that it's finally getting released. Will it be as popular if we're no longer pandemic related? We'll talk about all that and more in just a bit. Greg Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
This is the Chad Benson Show. Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. Charles Barkley gave his opinions on race relations, and I'll go ahead and play those for you.
Yeah, but the one thing I took out of that piece was, man, I think most white people and black people are great people. I really believe that in my heart. But I think our system is set up where our politicians, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, are designed to make us not like each other so they can keep their grasp of money and power. They divide and conquer.
You know what's so interesting about this take? It's all over the place on the internet, and honestly something that people talk about a lot. The first part of the take, the fact that most people, regardless of their race, are good people, isn't a hot take at all and should never be a hot take. It's just true. most people on this planet are, for the most part, good people. We all have human errors within, our own selves, but most of us do not have the hateful feelings that sometimes feel like what everybody thinks. Sometimes, by the way, some of this conversation is had and some of the way it's reported, you'd come away with the assumption that almost everybody in society is a hateful person, and a majority of people are not, as Sir Charles Barkley informs us. Then he says that politicians have a vested interest in keeping us divided, and I think that that's much like any other topic of conversation that is extremely exaggerated beyond the reality of it. Georgia comes to mind as one thing that I think right now is being overplayed, or even the Derek Chauvin trial and what we believe to be the outcome of it and what it says about our society. That's kind of the narrative right now, is that depending on whether or not Chauvin is found guilty, our society is or maybe isn't, although probably still is, racially divided, and still a lot of problems exist within our society. And that all is going to be determined by a group of individuals in a courtroom hearing about whether or not one man committed a crime. And that doesn't seem to be an appropriate amount of additional stress to weigh or to add to that jury, as my guest talked about a little bit earlier. But let's hear a little bit more from Charles about how he thinks that race relations and the political agendas are different.
I truly believe in my heart most white people and black people are awesome people, but we're so stupid following our politicians, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. And their only job is, hey, let's make these people not like each other. We don't live in their neighborhoods. We're all got money. Let's make the whites and blacks not like each other. Let's make rich people and poor people not like each other. Let's scramble the middle class. I truly believe that in my heart.
Yeah, and I've talked about this before too. I feel that some politicians look to create an enemy out of those that we disagree with, and other politicians maybe don't do that quite as much. And the reality is that we just have different ways of thinking. The people themselves who hold these opinions, the people that don't vote the same way you vote, are not necessarily any more evil than you. Sometimes you might not understand how they can think the things they do, but that's different. And the fact that we seem to raise the stakes so often, and honestly, I believe this, and I don't know if I'm in the majority. I'm pretty sure I'm in the minority. The new law in Georgia, the new law that has caused the MLB to leave, not have the All-Star game in Atlanta, is something that needs to be better understood than it's being understood right now. Case in point, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution had to issue a retraction on a claim that they made. President Joe Biden had said that the new law restricts the hours of voting, limits the hours for people in the state to vote. This is something that was echoed by the paper. They then said that a previous version of this story said the new law would limit voting hours. This is quoting them in their retraction, which is not getting anywhere near the media coverage that the initial statement got. On Election Day in Georgia, polling places are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and if you are in line at 7 p.m., you're allowed to cast your ballot. Nothing in the new law changes those rules. They continued with their correction. However, the new law made some changes to early voting. The bill allows for a second mandatory Saturday of early voting for general elections, but then removes 2 weeks of early voting before a runoff election. So were the hours changed for voting? No. But most stories you hear, most headlines you hear include that idea that voting hours were restricted. You cannot give someone a bottle of water or a piece of food while they wait in the super long line to cast their vote. Well, that's not exactly true. The state can give food to anybody they want, as long as it's not politically motivated. And people with political opinions, people that are part of political groups or organizations, cannot give you something while you wait in line to vote right before you vote. That's not an appropriate way to potentially change the vote of an individual from one to the other side. Because if you were just handed a bottle of water when you're thirsty from someone who's like, oh, by the way, I'm part of the Democratic Party and I'm just here hanging out, making sure everybody has water, it might make you think, well, that guy was nice. Maybe I'll vote for the people on his side of the ticket. And it's just so crazy that these sort of things can be covered such a different way and cause the uproar that they're causing right now. When in reality, in my opinion, and I'm sure that my opinion can also change as the execution of the law takes place and you see whether or not its impact is as great or as insignificant as some think it could be, we will see in the future, as long as the law stays in the books, how it actually affects the outcome, the turnout for elections in certain communities. This will all be information we have the next time there's election, we'll be able to point to certain communities, and if they voted as much or didn't get their voice heard as much as in previous elections, this will all be things they can discuss and change the law again. You don't have to have corporations going after it and saying that, nope, I'm so woke, I can't be a part of this, because you don't really, and honestly, you don't need that oftentimes. I also saw this story about California teachers. There was a successful negotiation, I think, in San Diego, Sacramento, San Jose, to allow teachers to bring their kids to school so that they can resume in-person teaching, and if they have to care for a child, can also have the kid in school. That makes sense. I don't have a problem with that. That makes sense to me. You got a kid, you don't know how to take care of your child and also return to work. 2 birds with 1 stone, get your kid into the school too, and then boom, everything's fine. Now, the United Teachers of Los Angeles would like something a little bit different to happen. They'd like to have subsidized child care for teachers that return to work, and they would like the teachers to be allowed to keep working from home if their kids are home, so they don't have to pay for child care. Now, the reason that might be more interesting to a lot of people than the first rule is how many people would have wanted this, how many parents would have wanted this back when we had pandemic issues a year ago. There's a lot of parents who are thrilled that schools will reopen and they'll get their kids back into classrooms because they struggled with childcare themselves, that would like to see this change as we start to get, and I will continue to say it, closer and closer to a world where coronavirus hopefully is in the back portions of our mind and not necessarily a day-to-day issue. How many people would have loved that then that now are waiting for teachers to gain it so that they return to the classroom? I'm not trying to attack teachers by even talking about this topic. I just think that it's going to be a very interesting issue, and one that I don't know if the parents are going to fully support and understand to the degree that you'd want them to, when other places like San Diego, Sacramento, and San Jose made a different call that seems to make just as much, if not more sense, than costing more money and paying more dollars to get things that may or may not be as necessary, and honestly something that people didn't have access to just a few months ago. It's a very hard double standard to set, and one that I know will probably be talked about more and more. And I'm sure there's a lot of people quoted out there as saying, look, I want to go back to the classroom. I just can't because my kid is with me and I don't know what to do. And I feel for people in all those situations. It's not always the most appropriate of moves to have the government throw money at a problem. And our government has been throwing a lot of money at a lot of problems recently. So to throw more and more money at more of these problems might not actually be the most beneficial of solutions in the long term. Just saying it. I know sometimes I'm in the minority even for saying that, but I'm saying it. This is Craig Collins filling in. A quick break on the Chad Benson Show.
No fake outrage here, just the real thing. The Chad Benson Show.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. I first accidentally thought that this audio happened on Sunday morning, but it actually happened Saturday night. This happened in Canada. A pastor was conducting a Christian service during a fairly important holiday for a lot of Christians out there, the Passover, the Easter holiday season. And again, this happened Saturday evening. It was a mass for celebration of the return of the Lord and Savior. And police showed up. Police showed up because they didn't want the service to happen because obviously during pandemic and whatnot, they thought that it was bad. Now, granted, they didn't have any legal right to be there. And there was one spokesperson human that seemed a little bit different than the officers themselves that also stood in the doorway. And a interaction happened between the pastor of the church giving a mass and the law enforcement individuals that were somewhat intent on trying to shut it down. They failed because of the way that he reacted. It's surreal to hear it all. And I'm not trying to say that, police are the bad guys per se in this story, but the overarching message that government steps in and regulates how you, where you, when you worship is a really problematic one for anyone in the religious side of the argument, as is demonstrated by this.
Please get out. Get out of this property. Immediately get out. Get out of this property immediately. Out. I don't want to hear anything. Out of this property immediately. I don't want to hear a word. Out. Out. Out of this property.
What's crazy to me, there's a lot of things crazy to me. The first one is that he's screaming as much as he is, and the one woman is still trying to talk to him. He's telling them to leave. They don't have the authority to be there and to shut anything down. And they're not leaving. They're trying to have a conversation with the guy, and he just keeps screaming. Also, if this were you at a mass and you just look behind yourself. You're like, hey, what's the pastor up to? Oh, he's just yelling at some people. All right, we're going to wait here patiently for church to start again. I mean, that's sort of surreal in of itself. As I said, it continues. The police officers finally do go outside and they start to walk away. But the pastor, he is not having any of it.
Property. Go. So go. Go. And don't come back without a warrant. Out, Nazi. Out. Out. You understand? Nazis are not welcome here. Out. And don't come back without a warrant. Do not come back without a warrant. You understand that? You're not welcome here. Nazis are not welcome here. Gestapo is not welcome here.
He keeps going. He honestly even turns the camera to himself for just a second and says this.
Passover, the holiest Christian festival in a year. And they're coming to intimidate Christians during the holiest festival? Unbelievable. What is wrong with those sick psychopaths?
You got to laugh a little bit because, one, you got to remember that this guy's a pastor, and so he's going to return back to the Mass and start to articulate something about Jesus is risen and it's good for a lot of people. Like, there's going to be a lot of conversations immediately after that interaction with police officers that are of a different tone, unless that's just the way he does the whole Mass. Maybe that's how he conducts the whole thing. I don't know. And obviously, a lot of people are going to agree with him. If there's no law, if there's nothing shutting down the establishment, and even if there are some, religion is always going to be a tricky, double-edged sword to have those conversations. But this happens in Canada. This happens on Saturday night, a Passover celebration, Christians in a church, and police officers kind of, sort of try to shut it down. Obviously, if he had been agreeable, if he had had conversation with them, if they had indicated to him that he needed to shut it down, even though they didn't have a warrant to do it, and he had just followed their recommendation, there would have been no Mass. This is not a guy you show back up and mess with again until you do have a warrant. And I just wish I had video of him returning to actually conduct the rest of the Mass, because that to me is more intriguing than everything that goes down there. It's more intriguing to see the way that any professional, and he's a pro, pivots back to what you were doing before you have a 5 to 10 minute screaming match with members of law enforcement that show up at the door asking you to reconsider what you're currently doing. This is a different screaming match. Probably certainly nowhere near as valid. A guest at Disney World allegedly refused to comply with a COVID-19 safety protocol. They didn't want their temperature taken before going into the park. This report said that after the attempt, the man claimed that he had paid so much money, there's no way he could get in trouble, no way he could get arrested. Unfortunately, he did get arrested for that. The plead is not guilty right now on an innocent charge that occurred, I think this was back in February too, so this didn't even happen recently, but it broke in the Orlando Weekly. Louisiana native reportedly walked past a temperature check near the park. The retail and the restaurant area refused to return to take the check, said they paid $15,000 to get into this park. Therefore, they are immune to any sort of legal action. Unlike the presidency, unlike being in an office where you cannot be legally, that is not the case. If you pay $15,000 to go to Disney World, you aren't necessarily as protected as in other situations. You can get in quite a bit of trouble. So it's very interesting to see. It's very interesting to talk about and to think what the actual, potential outcome is to this moving forward. Because honestly, as you digest this story and every other story out there, you just hope for things to be different. You just hope for us to get through all the different challenges that we've faced so that this sort of stuff doesn't happen. A person doesn't want to take a check of their temperature for whatever reason. They want to have some rights, and they wind up not having rights, and the amount of money they spent not terribly relevant to the argument. In other news, totally shifting gears, because we always need to shift gears as much as we can. Subway is being hailed on social media for something I didn't even know happened. Honestly, I didn't notice this at all. Last June, Subway dropped roast beef and rotisserie chicken sandwiches. No one supported the decision. The franchise owners didn't. The customers didn't. Only the executives behind it thought it was a good idea. The theory is that they're expensive meat, and so really they don't need to be served in an old Subway. Well, they're back. The cheap meat era is ending, I guess less than a year after it started. Subway has announced they're bringing both meats back to the table. One franchise owner was quoted as saying, "Who has a deli shop without roast beef? I mean, it's ridiculous." So I guess that's some good news. Some more lighthearted news from all of it is that if you think that, by any chance, any sort of way in which Subway was going to, what's the best sandwich? This is me. My opinion. I don't know why I'm saying that so much in the show, but I am. a roast beef and turkey together sandwich. The club, I think that's the best possible move to go. And it's a shame that Subway does not really embrace it as much as some of the other places do. Subway's not a sponsor, Phil. You can tell me in my ear if they are, because I will change my opinion immediately. Okay, but if Subway's not a sponsor, then Jersey Mike's is a better sub. It just is a better sub if you want to try it out. And they do have the number 9, and you can add bacon to that. I think it's actually the standard. This is not a commercial for Jersey Mike's. I'm just saying that if you were missing the old roast beef, even though it's returned now to Subway, there are other options out there on the table, options that make a lot of sense to a lot of us, that don't. Whatever. It is what it is. I do think it's weird that if everyone was against it outside of executives, that it still happens. I mean, you hear that all the time. That happens all the time in the world of business. But if customers are begging you for an item, you can't tell them it's too expensive for you. No, we're sorry, guys. That roast beef that you want to pay extra for, no, you can't. You can't have it. You can't do it. After the break, I want to take a break here in just a second. I want to talk about this high-rise in Brooklyn that's been getting a lot of pub because it makes a weird shrieking noise. I have the audio. I guess wind passes through a high-rise in a weird way, and depending on where you're located, you hear it. It does sound a lot like a ghost or something scary, so I imagine they need to get that fixed ASAP. But people were interviewed to talk about it because news people are as bored as everyone else. I also, of course, want to talk about some of the other bigger stories of the day. Brooklyn high-rise, though, definitely coming up. Greg Collins filling in for Chad Benson.
The Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. Chad is back tomorrow. Don't worry, no need to boycott the program. He's back. Boycott is apparently something that works well if you're Ilhan Omar, which is something that still confuses me, something I can't get over this audio, and the way in which the comparisons are made. I know I've talked a lot about the rule in Georgia, the new law, and the reaction to it, and yet I do think that there's such a tremendous value in taking a step back from the language we all choose to use, and maybe some of the comparisons we all make. And maybe I'm going to error in that world too, but I'm a political opinion person. I'm not necessarily a politician. Let's see how Ilhan feels about the boycott happening right now and the push for more boycotts, the MLB removing the All-Star game for Atlanta, all that stuff going on, obviously hurting Black-owned businesses in the area as well as everyone else for not having that kind of revenue come into the community. Let's see what you think about that, Ilhan.
We know that boycotts have allowed for justice to be delivered in many spaces. The civil rights movement was rooted in boycotts. We know that, apartheid ended in South Africa because of boycotts. And so our hope is that, this boycott will result in changes in the law, because we understand that when you restrict people's ability to vote, you create a democracy that isn't fully functioning for all of us. And if we are to continue to be a beacon of hope for all democracies around the world, we must stand our ground.
So in your opinion then, Ilhan, we have to boycott all the businesses in Georgia. Otherwise, we're no longer a beacon of hope for the democracy and the appropriate ways democracy is supposed to work for the rest of the world. That's what's at stake here. That's the challenge we're all facing. No, please give it to me in the simplest of terms to understand, the most rational of terms to understand. Compare it to the apartheid. Compare it to the civil rights movement. This law that, by the way, doesn't change any of the voting hours, but that's something stated out there. Doesn't necessarily prevent the state of Georgia from giving water and food or what's needed to people that like to vote. It prevents people with political agendas from doing that. It restricts some of the ways in which maybe the early voting will happen in a runoff election, but actually enhances some of the ways that early voting could happen in a regular election. And the biggest thing it does is it looks for photo ID for people that would like to vote. And I can't put this better than Tucker Carlson put it when he talked about it. I think this was actually last week, just pointing out some odd differences with what we do need an ID for and what we don't need an ID for. One of the things potentially in a lot of places where you don't actually need photo identification, there's ways to get around that requirement. Voting.
Nationally, the overwhelming majority of Americans agree with it. They support mandatory photo ID for voting. According to a recent poll by the AP, fully 72% of people in this country believe that required IDs are a good idea. And why wouldn't they think that?
Honestly, that is a good pause for just a second. Why wouldn't you think that someone having to prove via photographic evidence who they are to vote in an election is a valuable requirement to have? And I understand the challenge in that it's harder for some people to access photo IDs than for others, and for different reasons. It's not any one reason that is true. Well, there has to be something put in place to make that easier then, I guess. But requiring photo ID, photo proof of who you are, when so many Americans, as I've said before, believe that the past election, which we're all told was not in any way, case, or way fraudulent, and I believe was not fraudulent, and anything that may or may not have happened wouldn't have impacted the outcome of the election anyway. But when all that is true, but a lot of Americans doubt the legitimacy of your election, certainly people in Georgia after the results of some other hotly contested elections, why not add additional layers of security to make sure that it's legitimate? It's not necessarily to silence a voice as much as it is to hear one. The attempt to hear a voice saying, we think this election is fraudulent, is where this law comes from, not we need to stop some people from voting. That's my opinion. And we don't know until execution of the law actually takes place and we see the results of who voted, where they voted, what communities were heard, which ones weren't, whether or not there actually was anyone silenced. And you better bet that if there are reductions, massive reductions in communities that typically go one direction as far as voting goes, that they will be huge points in changing the law again. That is how it all works. Let's hear a little more from Tucker.
You already have to show an ID when you fly in a plane or drive a car, open a checking account, hold a job, live in an apartment, or get a vaccine. But you don't need one to vote?
Getting a vaccine is one of the more intelligent ones to throw out there. And I know that people have opinions, and Tucker Carlson says a lot of things. Some of the things are easier to take than others for any of us. But it's true. You need an ID, a photo ID to do some stuff. Honestly, you need to prove that you're 18 to get into an R-rated movie in some places. Not all places, I know. And honestly, I don't even know if it has to be 18. But there are other ways in which we add a standard of verification to something that is much less important than voting in an election. And we have this tremendous pushback and these inflamed words as to how adding some level of accountability, some level of authentication to whether or not people are who they say they are when they want to cast a vote in an election is somehow a Jim Crow rule. That's what it is. That's the conversation being had. And I can't stress enough, in my own personal opinion, which happens to be the theme of the show today, but in my own opinion, that is not what's happening here. And you have to see it in action to truly understand it, to have the reaction so quickly be so strengthened and so, I guess prevalent that companies, businesses, Major League Baseball are making decisions harming business owners and people in those areas. And they're doing it because of the assumption of something and not necessarily the actual execution of it, is exactly what we were told not to do time and again with other issues that crop up, depending on what side of the aisle you're on. Depending on what side of the aisle you're on, the amount of patience you have for something to play out is limited or is vast. Here's a different story. This is in England. Everyone in England will be offered a weekly or biweekly, COVID test. The Prime Minister has said this is Operation Moonshot, $100 billion, or actually I think it's even $100 billion euro cost for mass testing. That the scheme has never been delivered, and its state is to aim preventing additional lockdowns, preventing additional spreads of the virus. Every 2 weeks, you hit up a test. Now, here's the problem with that. And the CDC has started to say that if you have a vaccine, you can travel and whatnot. If you create too much requirement, too much desire, too much whatever for people to go and get tested, go and get vaccinated, go and get anything, even if they're not necessarily the most willing of people to do it, and then you start to create avenues where places like workplaces or businesses could reject you if you haven't had your 2-week test, we start to get into some weird worlds. Do I think it's bad to get tested? No. Do I think it's great if you could get tested every 2 weeks, if you have the time for that and the ability to do that? Sure. I am absolutely a proponent of getting tested, of getting vaccinated. Those are all things that I personally will do when the option is handed to me. at the same point, I'm not going to require anyone else to do them. And I'm going to react to the world as it is. It's the same thing, actually, in both ideas. React to the world as it is in the moment with what's going on, with cases going up, cases going down, what have you. Don't react to the world you envision it to be, whether it's in Georgia or the United States or anywhere, because that world you're envisioning may or may not happen. And I know that this comes on the tail end of a pandemic in which we learned a lot of things about how the appropriate and best way to respond to this sort of an outbreak that we had not seen in a very long time, certainly in the memories of most of the people alive right now. We have learned a lot of information. We learned that via experience, and those experiences should be ever evolving, not eventually one-dimensional, which it feels like this is. The Test and Trace phone app will also be available to everyone in the UK to add to their phone so that if they aren't getting tested, they aren't getting traced, then maybe they'll be followed around. That seems scary. And this will just be yet another avenue toward, I guess, getting us closer and closer to a lot of your health. Do we really think that if we, and I guess this is the biggest argument to have, if you allow for the health of a pandemic-related thing to permeate so much of our lives, to allow you to only travel on a plane if you can demonstrate this or that test, do we think that there's not a chance that something less serious in the future might be utilized in a similar way, that there might be a similar standard created for something that is not a coronavirus pandemic, something that is simpler, something that is a lesser risk to society as a whole, and if there's going to be a debate on it? Because once you allow for something to exist in society in a way that feels different than what your common rights are, you provide the opportunity for that to change even more and more as we go. I know that that's me getting a little tinfoil hatty, but it's just the truth. Netflix also, just real quick, changing gears, and then I got to take a break, has lost 31% of its market share in the last year because of streaming competitors that have jumped into the space. I watched the Godzilla versus King Kong movie on HBO Max because it was free there. I didn't go to a theater. It's not exactly the kind of movie that I'd pay money to see, but it was fun to go watch it in my own home because there were some epic fight scenes that happened, and I understand how it did so well at the box office. But obviously, in the year of the pandemic, too, when so many people were turning to entertainment at home and streaming entertainment, to have all these competitors rise, I'm worried that there's going to be too many, and there already are, but where you have to pay $5 or $10 here to get access to one or two shows, and then streaming is not all that great, then it becomes the same as buying a DVD box set when you only have one streaming provider for one type of entertainment. But there's a lot of them out there, and obviously they're gaining, Disney being the most successful. And one other thing that's odd about Disney compared to HBO Max is they do put their released movies, their brand new movies, onto their platform, but you have to pay additional for it. You got to pay $30 extra so far for a brand new movie landing on the Disney Plus platform. HBO Max, which says they're only doing it in this year, next year they're going to get rid of it, is allowing you to watch every single one of their movies for free that airs in the theater same day. And it'll be interesting to see how those things impact the revenues at the box office. Obviously, the box office did very well compared to recent history. Maybe the Godzilla movie would do even better if no one could have watched it at home. I don't know. But we'll see. That's all definitely playing out in the world of entertainment. I wonder if you use them. If you're on a social media or streaming platform, which one are you on? How many shows do you watch? Tell me those things. Go to our Facebook page, our Twitter pages, the Chad Benson Show, Craig Collins Show, and tell me what you think of those, because it's only going to keep growing, because obviously the revenue is definitely there. And Netflix grew, by the way, year over year. They added a bunch of additional subscribers, still lost a lot of market share. That's how those sort of things work. I got to take a break. Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
You go, boy.
This isn't about right or left. This is just about right and wrong.
Right you are, Chad. The Chad Benson Show.
This is the Chad Benson Show. He is back tomorrow. My name is Craig Collins filling in. I am thrilled to be here, of course. I saw this and I thought it was pretty interesting. Scientists have created online games to show the risks of artificial intelligence emotional recognition. This is not necessarily them having their own, I'm not talking about sentience here. They don't have their own emotions, but their ability to understand the emotions of the people that they're seeing in the moment. Can technology actually discern a fake smile from a real smile? Can it get a lot more information from you than maybe you'd want technology to have? There is a new website, emojify.info, where the public can try out some of the latest emotion recognition software that exists on computers and cameras. One game focuses on pulling faces to trick the technology, while another explores how such systems can struggle to read facial expressions within the context of a situation. Their hope, these researchers, is to say that they will raise awareness of the technology and promote conversations about its use. This use has been very frowned upon in a lot of ways because of an invasion of privacy that exists in this and any other version of technology. I say this while also being aware that a viral story right now is the millions and millions of people on Facebook that had their information hacked. Would it be good to have technology start to learn whether or not you're smiling for real or smiling fakely? And how could that be utilized in forms that we can't picture right now, but might not be good? One of the researchers quoted as saying, it is a form of facial recognition, but it goes further because rather than just identifying people, it claims to read emotions, inner feelings from just someone's face. Facial recognition technology, often used to identify people, has come under intense scrutiny in recent years. Last year, the Equality and Human Rights Commission said its use for mass screening should be halted, saying it could increase police discrimination and harm freedom of expression. It's very interesting to be told by a computer whether or not you're smiling real or fakely and what that means. And it's very interesting to consider the potential uses of this beyond just, a silly little gimmick you put up on a social media app. Because, there's a lot of, I think, potential misuses for technology to get to that point and for that to be stored somewhere for whatever reason. Shifting gears, I saw this story about AOC. About all politicians, I guess, but AOC certainly one of the more prominent ones. And actually, it's interesting that she's so valuable as far as the public eye goes, because apparently she's not a very successful congresswoman. Out of the 240 Democratic congressional members ranked on their effectiveness in a recent bipartisan research study done by a Vanderbilt political scientist and some other organizations, found that she ranks 230 out of 240 potential members of Congress. As far as her effectiveness, she's put a lot of bills forward, it says. Not a lot of them have had success, because therein lies the rub, right? For either side, this is for the Republican side or the Democratic side, is you can say things that are very far to one side, that are very valuable to the base, the people that, you most care about making happy. And yet in saying those things, if they're too far out of the more quote unquote middle of the road solutions to some things, the odds of them getting passed are tremendously difficult. I mean, that was honestly the biggest criticism of Bernie Sanders as far as people go on the left. He was not going to get a lot done as a politician, and someone who comes more into the middle has a better shot. Now, you say that, and then you look at President Biden, you look at the things he passed, how partisan they have been so far, how there has been no ability to reach across the aisle, which is what we were all promised was going to happen when the man was inaugurated. And yet you wonder if whether or not someone could come along, if another party could rise up, if even a former president who hasn't served 2 terms might be a part of that, saying that they can unite both sides. Now, granted, that guy probably couldn't do that. Obviously, the opinions on him are very extreme. But the truth is that I do wonder, as we continue to progress down this road, if we eventually see a world where, politicians who are good at getting the news of the day, but not good at passing legislation, don't become all that proper. All right, I promised this to you. I want to get it real quick. I know we're about to be done here, but I want to get this on. This is a place in Brooklyn, a high-rise in Brooklyn, and a weird noise it's making.
Sort of a high pitch. Yeah. I think the wind goes through the bars, and this is what makes the noise.
It's sort of a whistling noise that crescendos into a high-pitched screech. We're hoping that it gets fixed, not just a minor reduction in noise.
When you describe something that your high-rise is creating as a high-pitched, crescendos into a screech, that does not sound good. When a high-pitched noise turns into something even worse, it sounds scary. I wouldn't want to live in that high-rise. If and I know now I'm sounding like a giant child. If you have the shrieking noise just throughout the day, whenever the wind's blowing, and it does seem like something we need fixed. Just think if this had been as bad right when you first get stuck in quarantine and stuff. If you're in the house every single day and you just hear something that sort of sounds like someone screaming the whole time you're in the house, that would be tremendously, tremendously scary. But then I guess you just move places like Denver where, they're legalizing more and more different narcotic things, and maybe you don't feel so bad. I did have that story. I don't think I have time to get to it today. You'll hear about it some other time. But there are Denver psychologists and medical people that are prescribing low-key, since it's not totally legal right now, magic mushrooms to help you get over some things. So if you need it, it's out there. Greg Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show. Talk to you again soon.
This is The Chad Benson Show.